好多台湾人民今天要参加集会，我来看一下各位。反大面，反独裁，反独裁集会。
People from mainland China protesting against dictatorship in Taiwan. Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I mean, you hear that and your first thought is just, wait, what?
It definitely throws you for a loop.
Yeah.
You've got individuals coming from a political system that, internationally is often described as authoritarian.
Right.
And they're the ones raising concerns about dictatorship in a place with a democratically elected government. The contrast is pretty striking.
Totally. It's like my cat started to give me lectures about being too lazy. The irony is just thick. So the mission for this deep dive, kind of based on the articles and discussions we've looked at, is to figure out what's actually going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a genuine contradiction? And if it is, what's driving it? We know you, our listener, want to get a clear picture without getting bogged down. Yep. And that's what we're aiming for. We're looking at an up media piece, some interesting chatter on Mobile 01, and just general background on cross-strait stuff.
Okay, so maybe the best place to start is just establishing the very different playing fields here.
Good idea.
Mainland China operates under a one-party system. That's the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
Right. No real competition.
No real multi-party competition, yeah. And significant restrictions on what people can say and do, and a system where, frankly, dissent isn't really tolerated.
Okay. And Taiwan?
Taiwan, on the flip side, is a multi-party democracy. They have regular free elections, a press that can be, well, let's just say, quite vocal.
To put it mildly.
And a really active civil society. People are constantly expressing their views, protesting, debating. It's lively.
Right. So very different context. Now, this Up Media article by Luo Wenjia, it really throws a curveball into this whole narrative.
How so?
Well, he's looking at the Kuomintang's, the KMT's, recent focus on something they call anti-green communism, and we'll need to unpack what that even means.
But his argument is that this whole anti-green thing might be more of a strategic move, like a way for the KMT to get closer to China while kind of sidestepping their long history of being against the actual Communist Party.
Okay. So it's like saying, we're not fans of that version of communism, but maybe this green version is the real problem now.
Something like that. It's like, we dislike that shade of red, but this shade, maybe we can find common ground, or at least a common enemy.
That's a really interesting point from Luo. He sees the focus on anti-green communism as potentially deflecting from what he thinks should be the main issue for them.
Which is?
Opposition to the Chinese Communist Party itself. His analysis suggests that by hyping up this green threat, the KMT might be, maybe unintentionally, maybe not, softening its stance towards Beijing.
Laying groundwork.
Possibly laying groundwork for stronger ties. He even mentions, quotes, someone implying the CCP might actually view the KMT's current approach.
Well, sort of look down on it.
Look down? What?
As a sign of maybe not learning from past mistakes, just kind of seeking appeasement rather than sticking to their historical principles.
Wow. Okay, that adds a layer. Now back to this green communism idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
The discussions on Mobile 01 get pretty wild from what we saw.
Yeah.
It sounds like some supporters of the KMT and also the Taiwan People's Party, the TPP.
They're a newer party, yeah.
They're using this term to basically accuse the DPP, the ruling party, of having their own authoritarian tendencies.
Okay, so what kind of accusations are we talking about?
Oh, things like controlling the media, manipulating the courts, silencing anyone who disagrees with them. You see forum users throwing around phrases like green terror.
Green terror? That's strong language.
Yeah, and drawing direct comparisons between what they say the DPP is doing and what the CCP does. It's pretty intense rhetoric.
And what's particularly interesting, and maybe raises some flags, is an observation someone made on Mobile 01. This user pointed out that the use of the term green communism seemed to just drop off significantly on Taiwanese online platforms anyway.
Drop off? Why?
Apparently after it was reportedly banned in mainland China.
Wait, banned in China. So a term used to criticize Taiwan's ruling party gets banned on the mainland, and then its use drops in Taiwan.
That's the observation, yeah. It certainly begs the question of where the term originated and whether its spread was entirely, organic. The user's comment was pretty sarcastic, kind of noting the sudden quiet after the alleged ban.
Yeah.
It definitely suggests something worth looking into.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
you've got these accusations of green communism flying around against a democratically elected party.
Right.
And sometimes these accusations seem to echo talking points that might be, let's say, convenient for an actual communist regime across the strait.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting when we bring in the perspective from mainland China itself.
Okay, let's go there.
Well, Chinese state media often pushes a narrative, paints a picture of Taiwan under the DPP as being really oppressive.
How so?
They talk about dissent being crushed, using terms like green terror, like you mentioned. They portray it as this really restrictive environment.
Which is weird, because don't things like press freedom indexes usually rank Taiwan pretty high?
Extremely high, consistently. Yeah. So there's a stark contrast between that reality and the narrative often presented within the mainland.
Right. So this constant stream of negative information.
Yeah.
You can see how it could easily lead to misunderstandings for people living in a system with such tight controls on information.
Absolutely. Someone whose main source of news paints this grim picture might genuinely believe the DPP is some kind of, I don't know, tyrannical force.
Yeah, they might have absolutely no real grasp of Taiwan's political scene, which is, I mean, incredibly open. Criticizing the government is practically a national sport over there.
It really is. And this ties into a really fundamental difference, which is the understanding of democracy itself.
How do you mean?
In mainland China, the official line often uses the term whole process people's democracy. But as our sources indicate, it lacks the core elements we associate with liberal democracy, the kind practiced in Taiwan.
Like what?
Like genuine competitive elections between different parties, a truly free and independent press, the regular possibility of power changing hands, those key things.
Okay, so if your definition of democracy is different,
then your definition of dictatorship might be different too. When someone from the mainland hears about protests against the DPP or criticisms of the government, they might interpret that through their own framework.
A framework where maybe any strong government action, even within a democratic system, looks like dictatorship.
Potentially, yeah. Or they might just lack the context for what normal political debate and dissent looks like in a place like Taiwan.
It's like trying to describe the color blue to someone who's only ever seen the world in black and white, maybe. They just don't have the reference points.
That's a good analogy. And it leads to this other idea that opposing the DPP could be seen by some mainland Chinese individuals as actually saving Taiwan.
Saving Taiwan. From what?
From the DPP itself. This connects directly to the CCP's narrative that frames the DPP as dangerous separatists who threaten national unity.
All right, so if you believe that narrative,
then protesting against the DPP, even in Taiwan, might feel like you're doing something positive, something patriotic maybe, without really understanding that dissent and opposing the ruling party is a normal, essential part of how Taiwanese democracy works.
Okay, so that explains some potential misunderstandings. But what about the actual protests happening in Taiwan? Who's really participating?
Well, when we look at the actual protests that occur in Taiwan, the background info and the news snippets we have point pretty clearly. These are primarily organized and attended by Taiwanese citizens.
Right, like we saw examples of protests against, say, legislative changes. Those were mostly local people voicing their concerns.
Exactly. Taiwanese people protesting decisions made by their own elected government. That's standard democratic activity.
So what then motivates the presumably very small number of individuals from mainland China who might show up at these things or maybe even organize something small themselves?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Are they genuinely concerned about this supposed green dictatorship they've heard about through state media?
Or is there maybe a stronger element of promoting a specific political agenda, like a pro-unification stance?
Yeah.
Or just wanting to oppose the DPP because of its position on cross-strait relations?
It feels like there might be more to it than just a spontaneous outcry against perceived oppression, especially given where they're coming from.
The irony here is, as the sources point out, almost palpable. You have people from a one-party state protesting against dictatorship in a functioning democracy. It's a situation just loaded with political tension.
Yeah.
And this raises a pretty significant possibility that maybe these actions aren't just random individuals expressing personal views. Maybe they're not happening in a vacuum.
You mean they could be part of something bigger?
Yeah.
A broader strategy.
It's a possibility worth considering, yeah.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit more. What kind of broader strategy are we talking about?
Well, think about it. It could be part of what some analysts call gray zone tactics or cognitive operations.
Gray zone, meaning?
Meaning actions that fall short of outright conflict, but are designed to undermine, confuse, or gain an advantage. In this case, maybe it's about sowing a bit of discord within Taiwan.
How would that work?
By having mainland individuals protest, it could be used to try and question the legitimacy of Taiwan's democratic processes, maybe make it look unstable or divided.
Planting seeds of doubt, perhaps.
Exactly. Or testing Taiwan's reactions. How does Taiwan handle mainland citizens engaging in political activity? Or even generating footage or stories for international propaganda.
To portray the DPP negatively on the world stage.
Potentially. Creating a narrative that might resonate with certain audiences who aren't familiar with the nuances.
And it's also important to remember, right, that these individuals from mainland China, they could actually be breaking Taiwanese law by doing this.
That's a crucial legal point. Depending on the terms of their entry visa or permit, engaging in political protests could very well be a violation.
So there are potential consequences for them, too.
Absolutely. Ultimately, this whole situation really throws a spotlight on the fundamental clash of ideologies across the strait.
How so?
You have the CCP's very strong emphasis on unification, on national sovereignty as they define it, and their specific state-controlled definition of democracy.
Right, the whole process, people's democracy.
Standing in stark contrast to Taiwan's deeply rooted democratic values, its commitment to free speech, elections, and its desire to determine its own future, whether that's maintaining the status quo or something else.
And looping back to Luo Wenjia's observation, the idea that the CCP might look down on the KMT for seemingly shifting closer without real internal conviction.
Yeah, that adds another complex layer. It suggests that even Beijing might see some of this anti-green rhetoric not as genuine ideological alignment, but maybe as political maneuvering or even weakness.
It's just incredibly complicated.
It really underscores how vital media literacy is. For anyone trying to understand these dynamics, whether you're in Taiwan, the mainland, or anywhere else.
You really have to be able to critically evaluate information, look at where it's coming from, identify potential biases.
Absolutely key, especially when narratives can be so powerful and sometimes so misleading.
All right, so let's try and bring it all together then. We've looked at this seemingly contradictory situation. People from mainland China protesting dictatorship in democratic Taiwan. We've seen how the vastly different political systems and the narratives pushed by each side heavily influence perceptions and can lead to genuine misunderstandings.
Right, the different ideas about what democracy even means.
Exactly. And we've also considered the real possibility that these actions, however small scale, might not be entirely spontaneous, but could be part of a larger political strategy, maybe aimed at sowing discord or undermining Taiwan's democratic image.
The cognitive warfare angle.
Yeah. So hopefully you, our listener, now have a much clearer framework for understanding the various angles, the ironies, and the contradictions at play here. It's not simple.
Definitely not simple. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder on your own.
Okay, what's that?
Given these very different understandings and perceptions of fundamental concepts like democracy and dictatorship across the Taiwan Strait, what are the long-term implications?
Implications for what?
For the relationship between the two sides, obviously, but also for the stability of the whole region. How does this deep disconnect in understanding basic political ideas affect future interactions?
That's a heavy question. It really makes you think about the power of narratives, doesn't it?
It does. And the critical importance of questioning the information you encounter, wherever it comes from. Always ask, who benefits from this story?
I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.